Launching the Antiquities Act of 1906, President Teddy Roosevelt created the nation's first national monument designation, Devil's Tower National Monument in Wyoming. The important purpose of this act was to preserve, for all Americans, significant pieces of the country's history. Ecology, geology, and beauty. But unlike America's great national parks, size is not important for monuments. Historic sites and other units of the national park system. Monuments are typically established by presidential proclamation, chosen as their personal memorials of the most special parts of this great country. However, occasionally these units of the park system are established by the direct action of Congress. Some are big, some are small. Some garner large budgets and staff, others next to none. And some eventually gain national park designation. America's treasures tell the story of the nation's past and present glory. The Colorado Plateau. There is no place like it on the planet. Commonly called the Four Corners region, it contains more national parks and monuments than anywhere else in the world. This singular geographic feature is aptly called Red Rocks Country. This singular geographic feature is large, larger than the states of New York, Illinois, Georgia, and Virginia combined. But in spite of all this land, virtually no one lives here. It is a geologist's paradise. It has domes, hoodoos, natural bridges, dramatic pinnacles beyond belief. Mesas, arches, petrified forests, dinosaur footprints, in spectacular canyons of all sizes and shapes. And if that isn't enough, one of the nation's most important rivers, the Colorado River, cuts through its heart like a hot knife slices through butter. So it is remarkable that this inhospitable land was home to one of the great civilizations of the world. The ancient Pueblo people, sometimes called the Anasazi. The builders of a network of cliff-dwelling cities over a vast region of America. During their 700-year presence, the Anasazi built many pueblos across the Four Corners region. Most were not spectacular cliff dwellings like these. In fact, less than 10% were. Some of these pueblos were multi-story structures with as many as 5 floors. These pueblos were, in fact, great cities. Upwards of 800 rooms have been contained in some individual buildings. Room sizes averaged about 6 by 8 feet. It is the ruins of these great structures that visitors want to see when they come in search of the ancient Anasazi.
These folks were using sandstone chunks of various sizes to make walls, in some cases at least 3 feet thick. And they were stone masons, probably who specialized in doing nothing but what we would today call bricklaying. What did they do for their roofing materials? This is where, to me, it gets interesting, because they used trees, and they used trees of different sizes in a perfectly logical arrangement for rectangular rooms. They would get the large beams, the large trees for doing the cross beams, and then they'd use smaller trees for the next layer, and then they would use smaller branches or grasses and then put mud on top. The trick is, where do you get trees in the American Southwest? You can drive around through Monument Valley, through Mesa Verde land, through Chaco Canyon land, through southeastern Utah, and trees aren't all that common. You find them in the mountains. The people that were living in Chaco Canyon about 1,000 years ago, just over 1,000 years ago, were making gigantic structures. And one of these structures, Chetro Kettle, has got 250,000 trees in it. Where'd they get them? They got them from at least 50 miles away at the Chusca Mountains. And we know this from looking at the chemical composition of the tree rings in the wooden beams that are still found there, because the chemical composition matches the chemical composition of the trees in the Chusca Mountains. How were they getting those trees from 50 miles away? They didn't have draft animals, so they didn't have horse-drawn carts. They didn't have the wheel. They carried those things or floated them down a river. But it's a huge labor investment that we're talking about. And many times today, people will think about these folks were eking out a living and scratching out resources from the landscape. These folks had free time, and they had the ability to focus, to concentrate resources. Somebody was inducing probably young men to spend a great portion of their adulthood doing nothing but transporting beams from 50 miles away.
There are over 12 units of the National Park System preserving Anasazi ruins. However, 2 of the best preserved and accessible Anasazi sites are found in Arizona and New Mexico. 2 sites that are well worth visiting: Bandelier National Monument and the fabulous ruins of Canyon de Chelly National Monument. When you go to Canyon de Chelly National Monument, imagine you are a 19th century explorer, surrounded by breathtaking rock landscapes. A native guide whispers he wants to show you something special. He leads you into present-day Canyon de Chelly. When you arrive, your breath catches in your throat, and your eyes widen in amazement as you gaze upon a vast network of stunning abandoned pueblos. Set aside in 1931 by President Herbert Hoover, Canyon de Chelly National Monument lies in northeastern Arizona, part of the ancient home of the Anasazi. The monument, located entirely within the Navajo Indian Reservation, is actually a complex of canyons: Canyon de Chelly, Canyon de Muerto, and Black Rock Canyon. Myth and religious scholar Joseph Campbell has called these canyons the most sacred place on earth. The name Anasazi was given by the Navajos to these earlier people. It means ancient enemy in Navajo. Is it perhaps that the Navajos believed malevolent ghosts of the Anasazi continue to haunt this land? About the time the first Roman Emperor Octavian Augustus was bringing a Pax Romana to the ancient Roman Empire, and Italy's city of Pompeii was being destroyed by the eruption of Mount Vesuvius, the first Anasazi started settling in Canyon de Chelly. It is one of the longest continuously inhabited places in North America. Historically, the first Anasazi relics in Canyon de Chelly date from about 90 AD. However, the Anasazi did not arrive in significant numbers until 200 years later, and thereafter made the canyon their home until they disappeared from the pages of history around 1300 AD. Around 700 AD, the Anasazi built immense cliff dwellings on the south-facing canyon walls. These stone and mortar structures provided year-round lodging. They were shaded in the summer by an overhanging ledge and warmed in the winter by southern exposures. The cliffs may also have provided defense. Today, these remarkably preserved cliff dwellings, such as First Ruin and White House, can be viewed from overlooks along a network of roads winding through the monument. To get close to these ancient ruins, you'll have to hire a Navajo guide. A guide who will steep you in the haunting lore of the area and reveal the meaning of the land to them.
When you're down there, it's like the canyon is still alive. You can feel all that energy inside of you, and it's basically different from the water streaks, like the black lines you can see. That's what attracts most of the people, is the desert varnish.
From the air, or driving across the Colorado Plateau, even the casual observer discovers that the Colorado Plateau is dry. Dry and hot. In large part, except for the higher mountain peaks, the Colorado Plateau is a desert environment. Indeed, most of the landscape is bare rock, and most of those rocks are red in color. And if you do find water, it's found at the bottom of the canyon as a free-flowing river. Finally, if you take a careful look at the rock, you can see banding. Sometimes subtle and other times distinctive layer upon layer of different colored rock. This different colored rock suggests that these layers were laid down over time. Laid down in the far distant geological past. Geologist Wayne Ranney has spent years studying the Colorado Plateau and has written the definitive book on its geology.
The United States is divided up into 26 physiographic provinces, of which the Colorado Plateau is one that's centered on the Four Corners area: Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, and Utah. And the distinction of the Colorado Plateau is that it's an area of highly uplifted sedimentary rocks that have been very little deformed when they were uplifted. And that's what separates it from the surrounding provinces of the Rocky Mountains and the Basin Range.
For a long time, the forces behind the remarkable uplift of the Colorado Plateau remained a mystery.
So the Colorado Plateau has been uplifted thousands and thousands of feet from below sea level, and there's been many theories advanced onto how it could have been uplifted. And what is known is that two plates collided in the geologic past, the Farallon Plate and the North American Plate, and the subduction of the Farallon Plate beneath the edge of North America is essentially what caused the uplift of the Colorado Plateau.
So as this ancient block of sedimentary rock was being pushed up from below, something else was happening. That something was water erosion. Erosions caused by the cutting power of flowing water.
What this uplift did to the Colorado Plateau is it placed it at a position where the elements of weathering and erosion could attack this uplifted plateau. And the large rivers that exist in this area have sliced down into this vast stack of sedimentary rocks and created numerous canyons that are separated by these huge mesas or plateaus that separate the rivers. When one travels on the Colorado Plateau, they're liable to see a lot of rocky pinnacles that are sticking up in the landscape. Monument Valley is a great area to see this, Canyonlands National Park. And a lot of people who are unschooled in geology might think that these giant spires were pushed up out of the ground like a popsicle. But really what they are erosional remnants of once continuous strata that used to sit across the entire landscape. And the plateau has an approximately 3-mile thickness of stratified rock. And as these rivers cut down into the various layers, they cause canyons to form, and as those canyons widen, the rocks become narrower and narrower, and eventually you're left with a small pinnacle as an erosional remnant on the landscape.
It is from this geological process of dissecting the land into the vast canyons of the Colorado Plateau that the city-states of the ancient Pueblo people were built. Bandelier National Monument is unique among the Anasazi ruins in the Four Corners region. unique because of the geology out of which it shaped its cliff dwellings. Resting in northern New Mexico, Bandelier National Monument, which protects over 33,000 acres of rugged but beautiful canyons and mesas, was added to the park system in 1916 by President Woodrow Wilson. But it was over 1 million years ago that the monument's dramatic cliffs of Frijoles Canyon were created from the ash of massive volcanic eruptions. After the volcano emptied its magma chamber, it collapsed into itself, leaving a circular depression called a caldera. Bandelier is located on the outer slope of this caldera, known today as the Valles Caldera. As the hot ash from the volcano cooled, it fused into a rock called tuff. Tuff being lightweight and soft. Over time, wind and water gradually eroded away the softer parts of the wall, creating great holes in the exposed canyon faces. When the Anasazi encountered these natural caves, they cleverly took advantage. With hand tools, they enlarged and shaped the cliff openings into useful shelters called cavates. They also cleverly used tuff blocks to build apartment-like homes along the cliff faces in front of the cavates, and one large kiva in front of them, all of which can be experienced up close and personal on a visit to Bandelier National Monument. Arriving at the visitor center, there is a short 1.2-mile loop trail that takes you up to and through a number of amazing ancient ghost towns. First encountered is Big Kiva. In ancient times, this kiva was covered by a roof made of earth and wood. Imagine yourself climbing down a ladder into a darkened space below. Torches casting dancing shadows on the wall. The elders making important decisions. Or perhaps a young man or woman initiated into the wisdom and secrets of the culture. Big Kiva was the communal heart and soul of the people who lived here. It is from Big Kiva you get your first look at Talus House, a reconstructed cliff dwelling built from the fallen rocks below. There are spectacular cavates in the rock along the cliff walls, cavates that wooden ladders allow access to. The gentle hike up to Talus House provides easy access to these ceremonial cavates. Most had stone rooms built in front of them, as you see here. It is here that one can get a sense of what those early Pueblo people experienced as they looked out over their homeland. From here, one gets a wonderful view of the signature structure in the monument, Kawani. The stone ruins were once the foundation for a 2-story tall structure with over 400 rooms, most of which were used for storing food. The stone wall surrounding the plaza of Kawani would have been plastered with mud. Access to the thriving village was through a single ground-level opening. It is estimated that approximately 100 people were housed here, with others living along the cliffs. Life expectancy for the ancestral Pueblo people was about 35 years, and they ranged in height from 5 to 5.5 feet. Continuing along the trail, one encounters the foundations for Longhouse, a series of dwellings built along the base of the cliff, reaching 3 to 4 stories tall. Extended families lived together within these homes. Each had their own storage rooms, sleeping quarters, and a kiva. From here, one can backtrack or continue on the loop, which takes you along the stream that provided life-giving water to the Anasazi. It is a wonderful experience to imagine the thousands of ancient people who once thrived here. Bandelier National Monument, one of the great historic jewels of the National Park System.